So good morning. My name is Steve Pegram. I'm the treasurer of the Harlan Township Fire and EMS Levy 2025 campaign fund. Also currently serve as the interim fire chief for Harlan Township Fire and Rescue. Today we're going to go through a slide presentation on the upcoming Harlan Township Fire and Ambulance Levy that will be on the ballot in November. Today's meeting is Saturday, September 27th. We've already held 2 previous meetings, and there will be 2 more meetings, and we'll probably schedule some additional meetings later in the month. All the meetings are held at the Butlerville Elementary School in the township meeting room at the time. So we'll be back on October 1st at 5 p.m. and October 2nd at 7 p.m. if anybody's interested to come in person. So the proposed levy that is on the ballot in November, again, is a 3.5 mil levy. 3.5 mil levy will cost the average homeowner $123 a year for every $100,000 in appraised property value per the auditor, or $123 a year for every $35,000 in assessed property value per the auditor. When looking at the average home value in Harlan Township, the average homeowner will pay an additional $375 a year, or $1.02 a day. Many people are concerned at how they figure out how much the levy will cost them. So we provided this quick formula. You need to look up your assessed property value. That's what your taxes are based on, not your appraised value. Assessed value, multiply that by 3.5, which is the millage for the levy, then divide that by 1,000, and that will tell you how much the levy will cost you. To look up what your assessed value is, you can click on the Warren County, Ohio auditor's website and search by property address or property name. And just to give you an example, when you do that and you go to look at an assessed value, when you pull up a particular address, it brings up this screen. Well, unfortunately, at this time, it's not bringing up the second screen. But you go to the auditor's website, and if you scroll down, you will see assessed value. And then again, multiply that assessed value by 3.5, and then divide that by 1,000. Sorry for the technical trouble there. So I want to talk a little bit about the history of taxes in Harlan Township. I know everybody's always concerned with taxes, especially lately. Property taxes has been a big issue, not only in our region, but throughout the state. We have not had a tax levy or tax increase for fire and EMS in 21 years. So the last time taxes were raised or the fire department got any additional funding was in 2004. So if you'll see below, we currently have 3 fire and EMS levies that voters have approved. So there was a 1990 2.9 mil levy, a 1992 1.6 mil levy, and a 2004 1.0 mil levy. Those levies are continuous, so they remain the same. They collect the same revenue permanently. So if they generated $100,000 a year in 1990, they still generate $100,000 a year in 2025. You'll notice that I underlined the 1992 and 2004 levies. That is because those are, of the 3 levies, those are the only 2 that the ballot language allowed for the funds to be used for EMS or the ambulance service. So when you look at our millage that we have to run the fire department, less than half of the property taxes generated can be used for and fund the ambulance service. This levy that we're talking about in 2025 is all about staffing the ambulance and providing 24-hour ambulance service to Harlan Township. So we feel it's important for people to realize that half of our budget, or less than half of our budget, can be spent currently on the ambulance service. So Harlan Township has previously approved a total of 5.5 mils of property taxes. However, these property taxes, the millage is adjusted down as property values go up. So currently, based upon the property values of Harlan Township, all three of those levies, which were voted on at 5.5 mils, actually collect at the effective rate of 1.61 mils. Just to show you a little bit of how we compare with other communities and how they pay for fire and EMS. These are the surrounding agencies and their current effective millage. So this only shows millage, not their actual budgets. Obviously, Hamilton Township is one of the lowest millages, but being that they have a population of 35,000 residents and a lot of commercial property, that 2.56 mils generates upwards of $5 million a year. Whereas Goshen Township, which is at the high end of 7.96 mils, that generates just under $4 million a year. But it does show that all the agencies around us already have higher millage funding fire and EMS. And even if this levy were to pass, or when this levy does pass in November, Harlan Township still will have one of the lowest millage rates and one of the smallest, if not the smallest, budget compared to surrounding communities. A lot of people are concerned that their taxes just went up. That was because there was a reevaluation done countywide. It's important that you understand that fire and EMS did not get any of that additional revenue. And the reason why is levies that you vote on, like fire and ambulance levies, are outside millage. When your property values increase due to a reappraisal, only what is referred to as inside millage increases. So inside millage goes to the state, the county, the township general fund, which funds a few minor things, and schools. So those are the agencies that get additional taxes automatically. Fire and ambulance services only get additional revenue when they pass a new or a replacement levy. Hence why we're here today. Again, 21 years since the last tax increase that generated revenue for Harlan Township Fire Rescue. So as values go up, as I mentioned, the voted millage is reduced. That's why we have 5.5 mils of voted millage on the books, but we're currently collecting at a rate of just over 1.6. So essentially, we've been operating on flat revenue. The only additional revenue we get is when a new home is built or a new commercial property comes to the township. We do get a little bit more money because they start paying that. So talk about the current fire and EMS budget for Harlan Township. The three current levies combined generate about $460,394.01. Keep in mind that only half or a little less than half of that can be used to fund the ambulance service. The actual operating budget at the end of 2024, the last full year of data we have, was $588,515.21. So obviously, we are operating at a deficit. So we had a deficit in 2024 of $128,121,020, and that was to operate an all-volunteer fire department. How we cover that deficit is funding by grants, fundraisers, donations, and EMS billing. And we'll talk more about EMS billing. But EMS billing in 2024 generated about $90,000 for the department to offset our deficit. I want to talk a little bit about emergency medical services because really this levy is all about EMS or the ambulance. And unfortunately, ambulances are not free. There's a variety of ways to fund them. And we actually use several methods, but at the end of the day, you can't get free service. So EMS billing, as we spoke about, Harlan Township does bill some of the costs for EMS transports. We can only send a bill when we transport the patient to the hospital. So if we go out and do a patient refusal or just a lift assist or something like that, there's no billing involved. EMS billing, a little historical for you, came about in the 1990s. So fire and EMS agencies used to get free supplies. So anything we used on a run, the hospital in the ER room had a big storage room, and they would resupply our ambulance with anything we used, drugs, medications of any kind, supplies, oxygen tubing, oxygen masks, etc. All that was reimbursed for free. When that went away, the legislature changed the laws allowing local governments to bill to recoup some of their costs, but we don't recoup 100% of our costs of the ambulance service. So talk about billing, EMS billing for Harlan Township residents. So if you're a resident of Harlan Township, we assume that you or your landlord pay property taxes. So currently, when a Harlan Township resident calls 911 for an ambulance, we do send a bill for that transport, but it is sent to your medical insurance, Medicare, or Medicaid. Whatever the insurance company pays, we accept. Most insurances already have pre-designated minimum fees for things like ambulance transportation, just like all other medical procedures. The balance of the bill is written off, meaning we do not collect it, as we assume that residents pay taxes. So the bill goes to insurance, and then we write off the balance for township residents. EMS billing for non-residents, prior to part-time staffing, which we'll talk about in a minute, 70% of our calls were handled by mutual aid departments. So 7 out of every 10 times we were dispatched on a call, we had no volunteers available. And so there was a significant delay in response, and eventually one of our neighboring communities handled that call for us. Now, keep in mind, our residents don't pay taxes in other communities. So if a mutual aid ambulance responds to the call, you, the Harlan Township resident who does not pay taxes to that community, will be billed for the transport. The write-off that Harlan Township provides residents only applies when Harlan Township EMS provides the ambulance service. So when we have to rely on mutual aid or outside agencies to provide services to the township because our volunteers are unavailable, the bill can come directly to you. This is actually an example of a real-life bill that was shared with one of our residents. A 911 call, Harlan Township. If they fail to respond, mutual aid is called, and the mutual aid EMS responds and transports the patient to the hospital. The third-party billing company still invoices their health insurance. Healthcare plan pays the third-party billing the negotiated amount as usual, but this is where the difference is. Because it's a mutual aid ambulance and you don't pay taxes to that community, the balance due on that bill is your responsibility, as you're not a resident or taxpayer of the mutual aid department's community. So here you'll see a bill from Goshen Township Board of Trustees, because Goshen Township's ambulance transported this Harlan Township resident to the hospital. And that Harlan Township resident now owes Goshen Township $1,334. And that's pretty standard billing for when a mutual aid department has to take you to the hospital. That's part of what we're trying to avoid for our residents, provide the service. So one, it's your own community providing the service to you, but two, it will be a lot cheaper than a bill for $1,334 for the majority of our homeowners. So EMS in Harlan Township has been in crisis for quite some time, but it has gotten consistently worse over the last year or so. Prior to August 2nd, 2025, 70% of our EMS calls in Harlan Township were handled by a mutual aid ambulance, and that means our residents were being billed for that service. Neighboring communities notified Harlan Township this summer they can't and won't provide free EMS to Harlan Township residents that their own residents pay for with much higher property taxes. Neighboring communities can legally bill the residents, and they can also bill the township the actual cost of providing ambulance services to Harlan Township. Based on average cost estimates and the number of runs a year, mutual aid billing could cost residents of Harlan Township more than $1.7 million a year, which is more than double what the levy will generate. So we are really looking at, by providing our own part-time EMS service or part-time staffed EMS service, it's actually cheaper for the residents of Harlan Township than just contracting or allowing a mutual aid department to cover us. So May 6th, the day after the last levy failed through August 1st, the last levy did fail by 8 votes. We felt we needed to take action. 70% of our runs required mutual aid. Response times often exceeded 20 minutes, which is unacceptable. And our mutual aid departments advised us they could no longer provide free service and wanted to enter into a contract for billing, where they would bill the residents and the township for the actual cost of providing fire or EMS service to Harlan Township. Completely legal, but something we just can't afford. Essentially, we declared an emergency. In June, the fire chief declared the staffing situation at Harlan Township an emergency. The Board of Trustees approved using unencumbered funds. These are funds that were saved for emergencies or future capital costs, to switch from an all-volunteer model to a part-time paid department immediately. So during June and July, we made preparations for that change. And then on August 2nd, 2025, all of our volunteer EMTs, EMT advanced, and paramedics were converted from volunteer to part-time status. All of our firefighters are now paid per call, but they still respond from home or work. So it's still a typical like volunteer response, but when they're on a call, we pay them an hourly rate for while they are on the call or attending training. We now have, since August 2nd, 3 people on duty per day. Our minimum staffing is 2. We have to have 2 to staff the ambulance. We like to have 3, so when we have critical patients, we can provide a driver for the ambulance and 2 EMTs or paramedics in the back treating the patient. These are all part-time employees. We do not have any full-time employees at Harlan Township, do not plan to have any full-time employees at Harlan Township. But these 2 or 3 people every day are there to staff the ambulance. If a fire comes in and they are fire trained personnel, they will respond to the fire, but the priority has been and will continue to be having an ambulance available for Harlan Township. Since August 2nd, I will tell you that the system of having part-time people worked. Since August 2nd, 100% of our part-time shifts were covered, so we had coverage every single day. Response times that were exceeding 20 minutes were reduced to monthly averages of about 7 minutes township-wide. Mutual aid was only called twice, and both times it was because our ambulance was already out on another call. So it was a second emergency in the community. As a result of having part-time paid staffing, the number of people responding to fire and EMS calls has increased dramatically. What we have seen is for a lot of our former volunteers, they were already working a part-time job or had some type of side hustle, if you will. And now, because they're getting paid to work shifts and attend calls, they have a little bit of extra income coming in that has made them more available to us. We've seen a significant shift in the number of people responding to calls, and that's good for the community. So why do we need the levy? The part-time pay is the reason for the levy. The emergency funds that we're currently using to pay our part-time staff will run out in the spring of 2026. These were emergency funds, or what the auditor would refer to as unencumbered. That is money that we have saved every year going back the past 21 years, putting a little bit away at a time each year. We are spending down that emergency fund to provide staffing for the ambulance currently. And again, that money will run out in the spring of 2026. It may seem like a lot, but here's the breakdown of what it costs to staff one part-time ambulance or an ambulance staffed full-time, but with part-time employees, I guess is a better way to put it. So that cost is $764,075.82. Includes Medicare, Social Security, pension, unemployment, all the different things that were mandated by law to provide part-time employees. To fill the schedule and have 2 or 3 people on 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, we need probably roughly between 24 and 30 part-time employees. We currently have that. And this is based on an average hourly rate of $24 an hour. Some of our people make significantly less than that. Some of our people make a little bit more. But we use the average pay rate. You multiply the pay rate by the 365 days a year, 24-hour shifts, 3 people per day, plus all the mandated benefits that we have to pay by law. And that's how we came up with the $764,075.82. Just so you understand, the choice to use part-time staffing versus full-time is essentially with part-time staff, for every dollar you spend, a full-time employee would cost you $3. So instead of a little over $700,000, it would cost somewhere in the range of $2.1 million if we were to staff with full-time people, mostly because of pension and healthcare benefits. As part of the levy plan, we have already started to reorganize the fire and EMS department. So we've had a part-time fire and EMS chief and continue to have, and will have a part-time fire and EMS chief. You'll notice on the left-hand side, we had a part-time assistant chief. That part-time assistant chief on August 2nd went back to volunteer status, so no longer a paid position. And then we continue to have volunteer or paid per call people at both firehouses to respond to fire calls. And then on the EMS side, our intention is to hire a part-time EMS supervisor, someone to supervise and run our EMS program, oversee our ambulances, oversee our drug licenses, our supplies, our protocol, EMS reporting, QA, QI of EMS reports, and supervise our part-time people on a daily basis. And then we do currently have part-time people, EMTs, paramedics that staff the ambulance. But again, the priority and the reason for the levy is to staff the paramedic ambulance 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. So breakdown of the costs for the levy. Part-time command staff estimate cost is about $185,000. That's paying the salary of the part-time chief, a future to be hired part-time assistant chief to oversee EMS, 2 station captains, 4 lieutenants, and our recruitment and retention coordinator. You'll notice that actually this is a savings compared to 2024. And 2024, the salary of the fire chief, the assistant chief, and the recruitment and retention coordinator was budgeted at $190,000 a year. So this actually shows a slight reduction, but also notice in red, our recruitment and retention coordinator is a grant funded position. So about $20,800 a year and $10,000 a year for the grant administrator gets reimbursed by the federal government to the township. So in 2025, 26, and 27, the next 3 years of that grant, we should recoup about $90,000 back into the fire and EMS fund from the federal government. Paid per call firefighters, again, a little bit of a savings here. So we did previously have a stipend program for our volunteers, where every call, training, or event they went to, they accumulated points, and then those points resulted in a once-a-year stipend, basically referred to as a gas and uniform stipend, to reimburse costs of being a volunteer and responding to calls because they use their personal vehicles and potentially can dirty up or ruin their own clothing. So we provided that once-a-year stipend. We used to budget that at $75,000 a year. So we are predicting we'll have a savings there. Paid per call firefighters is estimated to cost us $50,000 a year. And again, those folks are on call, but they are only paid when they make a run, when they respond to a fire, a crash, or a second EMS emergency. Total salaries and benefits is just shy of $1 million. That's the part-time staff for the ambulance, the part-time command staff, and the paid per call firefighters, EMTs, and paramedics. Again, 40,000 of that will get reimbursed annually by our SAFER grant. So total cost of all our part-time and paid per call personnel, again, just shy of $1 million. The 3.5 mil fire and ambulance levy will generate 864,000, just shy of that. So we still have a little bit of a deficit for paying for our part-time staff, but we were budgeting for and had part-time people before. So the current levies, the ones I talked about earlier from the 1990s and early 2000s, will make up the difference of that 135,000 and some change to fund our part-time program. The levy and the reorganization of the fire department is about three things. The number one priority will always be staffing the ambulance. Number two priority will be responding to all the other emergencies that occur in the township. And then the third priority will be keeping up with our facilities, our vehicles, our training, equipment, and everything else that we do. This levy will not provide funding for fire trucks, equipment, or any of the other things that we do. The levy, as I showed you, is going to generate less than what our part-time pay and benefits will be. So 100% of the levy funding will go to part-time staffing, and that part-time staffing specifically for the ambulance. We need to look at other ways to save money. Obviously, as I showed you, we were previously, before we even started talking about levies, we were already running a deficit, and fundraisers, donations, grants, and EMS billing was paying for that. But we still need to trim some of our costs. One of the ways to do that is to be more efficient with the tools and equipment that we have. We currently have, for example, fire engines or pumper trucks, and we have fire tankers, which are water haulers. Great pieces of equipment, and we've had them for many years. But modern technology, they build trucks now that can do both jobs. So essentially, one tanker pumper can do the job of an engine and a tanker. So what we'll look at in the future is reducing the amount of vehicles that we own. Through that process, not only will we have less cost in acquiring new vehicles, but we will permanently reduce the costs to do repairs, maintenance, training, insurance, as well as the cost to replace the trucks, because everything will have less of everything, less tires, less brakes, less oil filters, all the things that we do to maintain our fleet. So that's going to be both a short-term and a long-term permanent reduction in cost. What we're proposing, and this is just an example photo for you, as in the future, we'll replace an engine and 3 tankers with 2 multi-purpose pumper tankers, something similar to the photograph. We can do a lease purchase agreement to spread the cost of that over multiple years, sort of like buying or leasing a car, versus paying cash up front. What that will do for us is fewer vehicles will mean fewer costs of tires, repairs, insurance, all the things that the old levies pay for now. So we're trying to trim those costs, make the department more affordable long-term. Fewer vehicles mean fewer vehicles we have to train on, so less hours that we have to commit to training, especially for our volunteer and paid per call folks. And we need fewer drivers. So right now, to provide a fire engine and provide a tanker, because a lot of Harlan Township doesn't have water, we need 2 qualified drivers to respond to a call. Now, with a pumper tanker, we only need 1 driver to do the same job. We also will save $1.6 million in vehicle replacement costs over the next 25 years. So it's a big number. Obviously, when you spread it out over 25, 30 years that we keep a vehicle, that number goes down significantly. But by reducing the size of the fleet, we're going to save money annually on repairs and maintenance and all of our operating costs, and we're going to save money long-term on our capital costs, or the costs of acquiring the vehicles in the first place. Another thought process is, do we really need a full-size fire engine, so a full-size pumper truck with a pump and a tank and all the tools and equipment it carries, now can easily be $1 million to $1.2 million to purchase. Put that in perspective, the last truck Harlan Township bought was less than $500,000. So we're going to look at a quick attack vehicle, something similar to the photograph. Smaller vehicle, easier to get down narrow roads, driveways. And the vast majority of our calls, things like brush fires, wires down, storm related incidents, motor vehicle accidents, can be handled by a much smaller vehicle. And these smaller vehicles, as I show in the example, range around $350,000 versus $1 million. So again, looking at long-term ways that we can save money with the existing levies that we already have. The ambulance service will go on with part-time staffing. Our current plan is to replace ambulances every 6 years. We own 2, so ambulance would be in frontline service for 12 years, and then we would replace it. So the next ambulance that would need to be replaced is in 2030. However, the build time to build an ambulance is 2 years. So the plan currently is in 2028 to order a new ambulance, and it will be delivered in 2030. And when we make the decisions around 2028 on what to do, we'll evaluate paying cash for the ambulance or, again, at least purchase and spreading it over multiple years as a payment. So over time, as the fleet is reduced, we'll sell all these vehicles. The sale of those vehicles will help offset the payment on the new vehicle. So as we sell trucks, that money goes back into our savings account or our emergency fund, and the board of trustees can then use that money to offset the lease purchase or put money down to reduce our payment amount, or potentially even pay cash for some of the cheaper vehicles that we own within our fleet. All about being more efficient in how we're spending money and how we're operating. Other items that are needed long-term, but there's currently no funding in our current levies or this new levy. Items like cardiac monitors. At some point, we will have to replace the 4 cardiac monitors. These are the devices that monitor heart rates, but also can shock a person who has a heart rhythm that will not sustain life. We can deliver an electronic shock and shock them back into a good rhythm. So very important tool, but we have 4 of them. They're going to have to be replaced in the next 5 to 7 years, and they're $55,000 currently. Self-contained breathing apparatus, that's the air packs that firefighters wear into a fire. We have 15 of them. They're currently around $8,008 each to replace. We don't have to replace them for about 10 more years, but again, it's a big expense when that comes up. Power lift cots. We have power lift cots on both of our ambulances. They're $60,000 each. So typically when you buy a new ambulance, you buy a new cot. So we're going to have to plan for that eventuality. And jaws of life or extrication tools. We carry a set on each of our engines at Station 81 on State Route 132 and at Station 82 on State Route 123. We did get one set replaced last year off a grant. We're writing a grant right now for the other set, but a set of tools is $54,000. So a lot of expenses out there, a lot of expensive things in the fire and EMS department. But we're committed to pursue grants and use donations to try to fund as many of these items as possible to lessen the tax burden on the community. So to recap, this is a 5-year levy. This is not a continuous levy. So it will only fund 2026 through 2030. Around 2029, we'll have to put a levy back on the ballot to replace or renew this to continue funding our ambulance. It is a 3.5 mil levy for fire and EMS. The 3.5 mil levy will generate an additional $863,673.93 per the Warren County Auditor. That cost is $123 a year for every $100,000 in appraised property value. Again, the average homeowner in Harlan Township will pay $375 a year, and that's about $1.02 a day. And what that gives you is a 24 hours, 7 days a week paramedic staffed ambulance and faster response times. So again, everything involving this levy is about staffing the ambulance, providing better service and providing faster service. Our next meeting is next week, Wednesday, October 1st at 5 p.m. The board of trustees meet at 7 p.m. if you want to stay for that meeting as well. And then Thursday, October 2nd, we'll be here again at Butlerville School at 7 p.m. We plan on adding a few dates later in the month, and we will post those to our Harlan Fire and EMS Facebook page. If you have questions, we do have an email set up, harlanfireandems.levy@gmail.com. Please understand that fire department business has to be on a public website and a public Facebook page. Levy related items have to be done separately. So that's why we have a separate Harlan Fire and EMS Levy Facebook page and email. So if you do have any questions based on this presentation, you'd like to have one of our levy signs, picture above shows what our levy signs look like, please reach out to us at harlanfireemslevy@gmail.com. Thanks for watching.